All right, now for energy systems. We're still in Chapter 1, Exercise Physiology. Energy systems is how our body is able to do what it does. It has to be fueled the way our car does, the way your alarm clock needs its power. Our body has that own need in itself. And the way that we do that is through energy. The body's source of energy is something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. What the energy is necessary for, it's for our body to produce mechanical work, for it to move. That doesn't mean you have to be moving around. Just at rest, our body is mechanically working through all of those innate autonomic nervous system functions where our heart's beating, we're breathing, there's blood flowing. All of that is happening without us even actually moving, but there's small work happening that we can't even see. In addition to that, maintaining our body temperature, and like I just mentioned, all the biological and chemical activities that happen in our body, from digestion to elimination to breathing, all energy is required for all of those. Now, as humans, as animals, how do we get our energy? The only way our body can do work is through the food we eat. It can store up the food that we eat, but if we are unable to supply fuel to our body, it will cease working when it runs out of fuel to use. So, we all know what food is, and we probably all can guess what the different parts of food that our body needs is. We need protein, we need carbohydrates, and we need fats. And those three sources are the only three sources that can be broken down to get ATP. We digest it. That digested food, after it's broken down, is metabolized into different chemicals, different bonds, different enzymes that are all part of cellular function for muscular contraction, for our physiological body functions. This graphic is just kind of a continuum of what happens. We eat our food. That happens. That food or fuel goes into our energy systems, and because of the energy that we eat, we are able to do work. We're able to function as a human being, or like you all are trying to learn more about how to improve performance, how to improve personal health, how to improve someone's activity in sport. Now, I talked about ATP. This is where it's going to get technical for a little bit, but understanding what ATP is, it is the primary source, not the only. It is the primary source used in a cell. Think back to 7th grade physical science or the last science class you took. The cell in a muscle, for it to contract and provide a force. ATP is needed for that. It is the breakdown of that ATP that releases this usable energy into our body. Now, the breakdown of one molecule of ATP could have anywhere from 7 to 12 kilocalories of energy. In the science world, it's referred to as a kilocal. We all know it as calories, so we will refer to it as calories from here on out. But I just wanted to say that if there's anyone advanced scientists out there that you knew that I knew that it's kilocalories. Once our body has broken down and digested and metabolized our fuel into this usable ATP, we either use it or we store it. Two things happen. The brain needs it immediately. We need for it to be stored so that it's always there, even when we're not eating, because we don't eat all day long. We sleep for hopefully 8 hours each night. So our body needs a store up of this so that it can have that energy available for our body to perform our vital functions. Now, this is important to know. Our three fuel sources: carbohydrates, fats, proteins. Carbohydrate When it is ingested, it is broken down and converted into glucose. It is used as glucose. If it is not used in the form of glucose, that glucose is converted to glycogen and stored in our liver or our muscles themselves. So glucose is its usable form. We all know that our blood glucose levels. It's transported in the body in the form of glucose. It is used as glucose, or it is converted to glycogen for storage. Fats are converted to fatty acids. They are stored as fat tissue or triglycerides. Proteins are broken down into what's called amino acids. Those amino acids can be used in cellular function. They are required. Amino acids are required for the cellular breakdown of ATP. If you have too many amino acids that you ingest and your body isn't able to use them at that time, it is stored as fat in the body if not used. So there's a table in your book, just kind of breaks down exactly what I saw for those schematic thinkers out there. Just a little bit helpful, break it down, remember the right words that go with each of our fuel sources. Now, we have our energy system. The energy system's what the body uses. Now, how does it actually break down this ATP? Well, it can do it anaerobically or aerobically. And remember, when I was talking about the cardiovascular system, I used two other words that are often joined together with aerobic, and that's cardiovascular or cardiorespiratory. Aerobic means there is oxygen involved. Now, that doesn't mean you're doing aerobics or you're running for a long time or you're doing an aerobic activity. That just means that oxygen is part of the actual chemical breakdown, that O2 that you inhaled, that peeled off the blood and pumped out to your muscles is a part of the chemical breakdown of the ATP to get usable energy. The anaerobic, as the name applies, is without oxygen. Now, why this is important? The first two are quick. They're easy. If you remember from chemistry, breaking down the different molecules or different everything, some of them are more complex than others. You have to have certain groupings to be able to peel off one element from another. These two are quick to break down, and they are very short. So you can't just rely on one of these or both of them. Aerobic's going to have to come into play eventually. This is where the fun part happens in our job, why we actually need to learn this, because which energy system our body is using and how we're using it determines what a body is actually capable of. How hard it can go, how fast it can go, how long it can go. All these different parts of why you decide what to do in your workout or with a client, with a young athlete, are based on how these three systems are trained, improved, detrained, used, fueled, how our body's able to break down the fuel that we ingest, how well our body can take out the oxygen from the good blood and get rid of the waste. That determines the performance of these three systems. So, the difference between anaerobic and aerobic is oxygen. Again, anaerobic is without, aerobic is with. There's 4 different processes that are involved in the aerobic system. Aerobic glycolysis can happen by itself, but aerobic glycolysis has to happen for the other 3 to happen as well. So aerobic glycolysis is most important. There is also an anaerobic glycolysis, and I'm going to go through and explain these different systems and breakdowns to you so you can understand why certain things that we ingest, certain things we do, are important to know. All right. So, our 3 3 starting methods. 2 anaerobic, the ATP-PC system, also referred to as the creatine phosphate system. This is an immediate, quick, right there, available source. It's the backup battery. It's there no matter what, so you don't lose it, you've got it, but there's not much in it. This is what gets you started. It's your jump start so that the anaerobic glycolysis system can kick in. Now, the anaerobic glycolysis, that has its limitations as well. There's not oxygen. What this does, this is from breaking down a glucose molecule that is within the muscle itself. Within the muscle, not within a muscle cell and the different parts of the cell. This is ATP that's broken down quickly within the muscle. You've got 10 seconds to 2 minutes of energy on this. Do we all have 2 minutes? We could, but with any given person, the amount of anaerobic glycolysis we can depend on automatically starts with the intensity at which we are doing an activity. Creatine phosphate system, not so much. But our anaerobic glycolysis depends on how quickly we're using this up to be how long we're going to be able to use it. Our oxidative system, our aerobic system, is our long-term source of energy. This is your endurance athlete's best friend because this is what keeps someone going. Your sprinter, they want to work with that anaerobic glycolysis. They rely on that because they're not going to do something that's longer than 10 minutes or 4 minutes or 2 minutes or 10 seconds even for their competition, their performance. Anything above that, the oxidative system, the aerobic system, is the most prevalent energy system. Now, I said it comes within the cell. Within this cell, there is something called a mitochondria. Mitochondria, we call that the powerhouse of the cell. Within that mitochondria itself, inside the cell, there are more. It's just jam-packed with ATP molecules. I mentioned the anaerobic glycolysis. I didn't point out there are two ATP molecules that are generated from breaking down the glucose, one glucose molecule. Now, there are 36 ATP molecules involved in the aerobic system. There's a great table, and it's something I think explains a lot about our bodies and how they work. In your book, it is a table that covers time and the percentage of energy system that you use at any given time throughout an athletic bout. The first system we had was the ATP-Cp system, the creatine phosphate system. That's got 10 seconds of life in it, so we're going to use it the most because we need to jumpstart our body, get it going. Well, anaerobic glycolysis can be involved in that. It gets started, so it's helping with just a small percentage. Anaerobic is possible because we rely on that already just in our day-to-day function because we don't run around, let me rephrase that. We don't go around running around all the time, so our basic intensity is relatively low and comfortable. That's how we're able to go throughout a day, being awake for 12, 14, who knows how many hours in a day, because we're using this our aerobic system. We're relying on the oxygen that we inhale. As time goes on, we've got 30 seconds, 60 seconds. Up here at 2 minutes, you can see how the percentages of the different energy systems start to change as our activity changes, as duration within the activity causes a greater reliance on different energy systems, because the aerobic system takes longer, but we get so much more from it that we want to rely on that. I always use the example of if you start running on a treadmill and you're going to run for 30 minutes. And you start running and you're so excited about running, and pretty soon you're just running and you're like, wow, I feel really good today. Yeah, you do, because your Atp-Cp system said, woohoo, you haven't worked us out in a while. We're ready, we're ready. Anaerobics, like, yeah, go, keep running, keep running. Well, when those guys peter out, all you're left was with the aerobic system. And if you come up to where you're hardly using, you're not able to use the aerobic system very much, it might not have caught up to where it needs to be, and you're in this funk. And you're slow, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm not even going to make it another 2 minutes, let alone another 25 minutes. And then if you keep going, you persevere, after a while, you get back. Well, that lethargic feeling, the I can't do this, oh my gosh, and the kind of euphoric feeling you feel at the beginning are a measure of how involved your energy systems are at that time. And when we feel a lot better, that's because our aerobic system has caught up to meet the demand. Now, the first system I spoke of, Atp-Cp system, creatine phosphate, just a quick breakdown of that, supplies the working muscle with an immediate source of energy. Remember that. Atp-Cp is immediate. High energy, quick, over, done with, done. What you also really need to know is this is not a system that you can train. You don't go and work on your Atp-Cp system so that you can get 11 seconds out of it. This is something your body cannot improve on. Anaerobic, yes. Now, the primary source in the Atp-Cp system is carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is the only fuel source used in anything anaerobic. Oxygen is required to break down carbohydrate aerobically, and to break down fat, and to break down proteins. All right, anaerobic glycolysis. This is the breakdown of glucose or glycogen without oxygen. Now I say glucose or glycogen because if you remember, carbohydrate, when it's broken down, it is either transported through the blood as glucose, used as glucose, or it's stored as glycogen. So our body can use what's immediately available in the blood in the form of glucose, or it can say, hey, muscle glycogen, hey, liver glycogen, let's break you down and get some ATP through anaerobic glycolysis. 2 minutes is the magic number. Notice there's a squiggly line. That's an approximation. Remember that. There's no automatic 2-minute shutdown. But there is a byproduct of anaerobic glycolysis, and that is our old friend lactic acid. We all know about that.